In your opinion, how accurate is our perception of ourselves? Because I feel like a lot of people, they have this image in their head of who they are, and but that could be completely different than the reality of who they are. So how accurate is that perception?
About halfway. There's been a lot of research on this where they ask people to rate themselves along various characteristics, and then they collect objective data to find out what is the person really like, how are they perceived by other people, and we're right about half the time. And sometimes those impressions we have of ourselves are a little too positive, sometimes they're a little bit too negative, but we can't entirely trust them. We're in the ballpark. Certainly, we have a
Mm.
ballpark image of what we're really like, but I wouldn't trust them entirely.
I do feel like that 50% number can make a lot of people feel uneasy though, right? Because like that's like a lot that like that's like 50% of your entire personality or your identity that could just be completely incorrect.
Well, or at least not perfectly accurate. I wouldn't say it's entirely incorrect. It's just the fact that, where do I stand on some dimension of personality? I think I'm here. Well, you might be sort of in the ballpark. You're probably not completely wrong very often. And it does make us all feel sort of insecure and uncertain because in navigating life, we want to feel like we know who we are, we know what our abilities are, we know how we're perceived by other people. But the fact is, we don't always. What that really means is we just have to keep our antennas up. We have to be attuned to the possibility that a particular image we have of ourselves might in fact be wrong. And that applies not only to our views of ourselves, but our views of other people. We're pretty confident about how we perceive other people and perceive the world. That's not all completely correct either.
So how do we get a better perception of who we are? Is it by looking at how other people treat us? Is it by looking at, because I feel like that even in itself can be inaccurate because like you could interpret the way someone feels about you in a completely different way than it actually is, right?
Absolutely. And there's plenty of research showing that we don't always have an accurate view of other people's perspectives on us. Because other people usually don't come right up to us and say, hey, I think you're a certain way and I like you this much or I dislike you this much. So we're inferring it from their behavior. And people don't always express how they feel about us, good or bad. So that's also sometimes inaccurate. And that makes me uncertain. I mean, understandably, that I am not absolutely sure. I think we just go through life assuming until we see other evidence that we're in the ballpark, that we're right. Let's go ahead and assume we're correct, but be open to the possibility that evidence is going to come along. We're going to get reactions from other people or feedback on some objective test or something we perceive in ourselves. New feed might come back and where we go, oh, okay, maybe I'm not as moral as I thought I was, or maybe I'm not as bad a person as I thought I was. Oh, people seem to like me actually more than I thought. It's a constant process of revision. And we'll never get to a point in life where we're just completely sure that we're completely accurate. And that's just impossible. So we do have to learn to live with that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like other people's judgments of you, I think it's also important to realize that like how many times do you go out of your way to compliment someone? Like how many times or even if something annoys you, like if you're like your roommate is doing something or like someone in your family is doing something, like we don't like to like tell the truth a lot of the times. And so that's where I feel like the problem with like just getting that external validation from other people or criticism from other people can be at a fault because like if you look at yourself, like you're very unlikely to tell someone a compliment or to give someone criticism, right?
That's exactly right. Yes, I mean, social norms sort of say you shouldn't go around all of the time telling other people how much you like or dislike them or judging them. And that's not our position to tell other people what they're like. So none of us do that well. And there is research also showing that when we get neutral feedback from other people, and most of the feedback we get is sort of neutral, right? We're in a conversation with people and they're not effusive and positive and they're not being negative, they're just being nice and neutral. There's a human tendency to assume that neutrality means negative, that when other people are just in the middle of the road, they must not like me very much, which is not true. Because we're all socialized to sort of be in this rather neutral framework when we interact with other people, we have a bias to believe that other people's views of us are more negative than they actually are.
That goes the other way too. I bet with maybe the positivity too. Where like we think that someone might not like us, but the opposite could be true. right? They could think of a positive view of us. They're just too scared to like say anything, or
Yes,
that's just the way they are, right?
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. We can misperceive that in both directions. But in general, when we get neutral feedback, we generally assume it's more negative, rather than getting neutral feedback and assuming that they really like us and they're not expressing it. Now they might really like us and they're being neutral, but our bias is to assume that neutrality means negativity.
No, why is that? Why do we lean towards that negativity, even when something's neutral?
My best guess is it's somewhat more adaptive to err in the direction of thinking that something is a problem when it's not, than thinking it's not a problem when it is. That a worst case reading of something, and this applies to an awful lot of reactions, we're much more likely to be nervous about something that's coming up that's probably not bad than we are to be really positive about something that is actually bad. Now, we can err in both directions, but we have a negativity bias because throughout human evolution, we've had to be attuned to the possibility of threats, to bad things happening. And so we're always, when you hear that noise in the dark room at night, you think something bad. You don't think, oh, somebody nice is coming to see me tonight. You're always going to interpret, not always, but you're going to lean in the direction of interpreting it in a bad way. And I think that applies to our perceptions of other people's reactions to us.
So what would you say is the first step of really getting a better understanding of ourselves?
Simply being open to all kinds of information. None of us like to perceive ourselves negatively, or we all want to think we have positive characteristics, and so we sometimes in our own minds embellish those. But all of us have flaws. Even if we're on a positive side of some dimension, we're often not as positive on that dimension. Yes, I'm a humorous person, but I'm probably not as humorous as I think I am. We have to learn that that's okay. We are human beings, and we have many different dimensions, many different aspects to our personality. All of us have good and bad attributes, and to some extent that's okay. Not bad attributes that hurt other people, but it's okay not to be perfect. And you're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And the mature approach to that is, well, yeah, I'm a human being and I've got flaws and I'm not as positive as I think. I'll continue to try to improve, but to be accepting of the good and the bad. Try to fix the bad, sure. But I think the reason we misperceive a lot of times, we misperceive ourselves, is because we want so badly to be positive on everything, and it just doesn't work that way. So it's just being realistic.
Yeah, I feel like a big issue. This is a big issue, right? Of how we perceive ourselves. I feel like a big problem that people have is
Yes.
they're unaware that they're prone to having blind spots.
Yes.
And it's a great example of this is when you look at other people's faults that they might not see themselves. Like you think to yourself, like, how do they not notice that? How do they not know that this is like annoying that they're doing that? But at the same time, when you have those moments, you have to realize that like I myself probably have blind spots too that I'm just completely ignoring.
Yes. Yeah, we all have blind spots. And I keep going back to research, but research shows that we assume other people have more biases and blind spots than we do. Not just about ourselves, but about everybody. When you have people rate, well, how biased are you? Everybody knows we're sometimes biased. How biased are you? How biased is the average person? Almost everybody assumes they're less biased and have fewer blind spots than the average person does. And again, that's just one of those things that makes us feel good, but it's not entirely realistic. We just have to recognize human beings have blind spots. We're not AI computers that just take information and try to process it in the most objective way possible. Partly because we have feelings about what we're like. We feel good and bad about ourselves, and we worry about it when we don't think we're doing well. So we feel a lot better when we embellish things a little bit.
So how do we be more aware of our blind spots? Something that I'm thinking about that could maybe be a possibility is asking someone close to you, like that you trust their opinion, that like they always tell you the truth. Like you find that type of person, you ask them your blind spots. Is that safe to say? And if so, are there any other things you can do to watch out for your blind spots?
Well, that's a good suggestion. The thing you do have to prepare yourself for is not to be defensive when you hear it. Because I can imagine myself asking my wife, well, do you think I have a blind spot about myself in respect to whatever? And I want to be open to it. And she goes, well, yes, you do. You don't perceive yourself right. You're not nearly as whatever as you think you are. Yeah. Then we get ego defensive about that. So you have to be open to the feedback. It doesn't mean it's entirely right. Even the other person's feedback may be distorted, but you do have to be open to it. It is hard to see your own biases, but again, I think it's just a matter of having an open mind, having sort of the humility to realize I can't know everything about myself or about the world, or about how other people perceive me, so I have to be open as information comes in. The thing is, though, we don't want people to obsess about it. You don't want to spend your whole day going through your life going, oh my gosh, am I really this way? Am I that way? What do these people think? Am I as smart as I think I am? Am I as a bad athlete as I think I am? That would make life miserable. So my approach is to just mosey through life, assuming that you're in the ballpark in your perceptions of yourself, but being realistic when evidence comes up where somebody's more critical than you think they should be. Well, ask yourself, well, could they be right? Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Sometimes people are much more critical about us than they should be. And to be comfortable with the fact that you don't know. And that's hard. That's very hard. But I think it's a healthy way to approach feedback about yourself, because if not, you're going to be dismissive of useful information about yourself because you just disagree with it, or you don't want to believe it.
Yeah, and the other side of that too is someone telling you something like a criticism, but how do we know if that criticism is unjust or maybe it's incorrect? Is it almost like a gut feeling that you can like tell like that might have, like that criticism might be applicable in your life, but maybe not for me?
Yes, it is so hard to know. I mean, it really is. I think about the times when people have been critical of me. Sometimes I'm sure they were right. Sometimes you can see they were right. Sometimes they say something and suddenly the light bulb goes off in your head and you go, oh, okay, you were right. I didn't even think about the fact I was coming across that way, or I didn't even consider this part of myself. Other times it seems completely wrong, and other times you're kind of unsure. All you can do is keep an open mind and look for more evidence. I mean, anytime somebody says something to you that you're not quite sure about, a fact about something, a perception of something, whether it's about you or about the world, the only thing you can do is say, well, let me think about all of the evidence and which way does it lean? And it's often not going to be completely clear. And so you accept you sort of readjust your perception of yourself and accept that, knowing it still might not be completely right. One nice thing about it is, though, we can get through life pretty well even with having some misconceptions about ourselves. I mean, we don't want to be too wrong, but, if you look around at people's lives, most people are getting along just fine, even though they don't perceive themselves completely accurately all the time. But they will enhance their lives to the extent they get a little more accuracy as they go along. We just can't expect too much out of ourselves in terms of how well we can understand ourselves. It's just a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, can that misconception of ourselves be almost powerful in a way sometimes? Because let's say that like you act more confident when maybe you shouldn't be. Like it's one of those situations. Like can that be almost a tool in a way sometimes that like because a little bit of delusion isn't the worst thing in the world, right?
That's right. That's true. That's absolutely true. And sometimes it does motivate people. If I knew I was as bad at something as I really am, I might not try to improve. I would just give up. But if I think, hey, I'm actually reasonably good and I'm going to get better, that would motivate me to move forward. So yes, a little bit of delusion is not bad. Even in both directions. Even if I have a little bit of feeling that I'm not quite as good as I really am somehow, that's motivational sometimes if we don't let it ruin our quality of life. And that's the real sticking point for me. You've got to accept the information sort of almost like an objective scientist, not be rattled by it. Okay, here's the way I am. I'll sort of move along and try to deal with that and get better, but not let it really affect me deeply emotionally. Because those emotional reactions don't do a whole lot of good at that point. If you find out information about yourself you don't like and you wrestle with that and feel awful, yeah, those emotional feelings don't help. Just say, okay, I'm going to try to be better at it.
Yeah, I know like someone like Steve Jobs, people were saying like he was very delusional with his dreams and his ambitions, but that ended up paying off, right? Because it made you think out of the box. Is it safe to say that sometimes thinking too rationally and practically can like avoid you from achieving big things? Is that safe to say?
I think it's possible, but on average, I think this is a bias. I don't have any real evidence for this. The more realistic and rational you perceive yourself in the world, on average, the better off you're going to do. Because an example like Steve Jobs is, yes, he was delusional and too positive, and he achieved that. But what we don't hear about are the other people who had dreams and aspirations and beliefs as positive as Steve Jobs that we never hear about because they really were bad at it and they never did succeed. So we don't know for sure what the percentage of people whose positive delusions, positive biases help, and what percentage don't help or even harm them, that they spend their whole life beating their head against a brick wall because they think they can accomplish something that everybody else in the world's going, you can't do this, don't even try, but they do. So on average, I would rather be rational and reasonable and as objective as possible about myself, even though you're absolutely right. Occasionally, that overly positive bias can be beneficial.
Yeah, but for Steve Jobs, it went the other way too, because that delusion, like with stuff with his diet and his health, like ended actually being his downfall, and it made him lose his life. And so that's the other side of it too.
I didn't know that. Yes, yeah, you could go too far.
Yeah, he definitely did with his diet. So I want to move on to the ego. How would you define ego?
Ego, among people who study ego, among the psychologists and other social researchers, it's been defined in 11 different ways. So I try real hard to sort of avoid the word. It's sort of your sense of self is sort of, I think, the way you think about it, that we each have an ego. What that means is we have a perception of who and what we are. And sometimes we need to defend that, and we get ego defensive, and that means we want to defend that image. But I just haven't had much use for the word because it means so many different things. Originally, it's just really the Latin word for I, capital I. So you're talking about I did this, or I thought this, or I am a certain way. That I is your ego. So it's just, if you substitute the word I, so if you think about you, that is, if I think about I did this, I did that, I'm thinking about my ego.
So how is being too self-centered a bad thing?
Being too self-centered to the disadvantage of other people is certainly not good for your connections with other people or relationships with other people. We all have to be self-centered in a way. We have to be self-preoccupied. All animals do. You have to watch out for yourself first, because if you don't watch out for yourself first, you'll give all your food away and you'll live in a cave somewhere, and you're not taking care of yourself and your own needs. So some people begin to feel uncomfortable when they realize they're putting themselves first. You've got to put yourself first in general. But where it becomes a problem is when putting yourself first disadvantages and hurts other people, damages your relationships with other people, interferes with your goals. So you keep one eye on what's good for you, but then you get out into the world and don't let that self-preoccupation, that egocentric perception of your importance, interfere with the quality of your life. And I think that's where it goes wrong. I mean, it's okay to be self-centered in the fact that I've got to watch out for myself. I do, and myself and my family and my friends. Everybody does. But I can't let that interfere with my role in the groups I'm in and in society. I can't let that just make me run over people.
Well, because if you do that and you neglect other people and you just think about yourself, if we go back when humans were just getting started, like that would actually backfire at you, right? Because then you're left alone to deal with yourself, and you need that support system. Even nowadays, even if we can be sustaining on our own, to be like emotionally and like physically healthy, you do need that like support system.
No question. Social connections and a sense of being accepted by other people and belonging to groups is really important for both psychological well-being and for physical well-being. Plenty of research shows people's physical health declines if they don't have those connections. So if you are selfish and run over other people and don't pay any attention to what other people need, other people aren't going to want to hang around with you. There was a study done where people rated the positivity of like 300 personal characteristics. And so, things like friendliness that ranks real high and humorous ranks high. among the worst 5 out of those 300 was the word selfish. People don't like selfish people. It's a bad thing. So I think the trick to successful living is to watch out for your own interests, take care of yourself, but do it in a way that isn't selfish, that doesn't take advantage of other people and always put yourself first. And usually you can do that. You can watch out for yourself and watch out for other people at the same time.
How does our perception of ourselves change as we get older?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, certainly through childhood and the teenage years, it's becoming increasingly, your perceptions of yourself are becoming increasingly accurate because you're getting more feedback from other people. You're finding yourself in lots of different contexts. Sometimes you don't get information about yourself on a certain dimension until you find yourself in a new context you've never been before. So through at least early adulthood, I think our perceptions of ourselves get increasingly accurate. After that, I don't know. That's a good question. I could imagine, that continuing experience as an adult gives you more accurate information about yourself. But I can also imagine that after a while, your views of yourself become so solidified. You've been perceiving yourself the same way for 10 or 15 or 20 years that it's a little harder to change that through getting feedback of one kind or another. So I don't really know the answer to that. Certainly it gets better through early adulthood.
Now, does having that more accurate perception of yourself as you get older, like a better understanding of yourself, does that lead to a happier life?
I would assume that it does in general, if you can accept all of the feedback, because you're going to make better decisions. I'm going to keep coming back to that the accuracy of our perceptions of ourselves help us make better decisions. If I'm misperceiving myself and I have to make decisions about where to go to school or what job to take or what kind of person to get involved with romantically, I'm going to make bad decisions because I'm basing them on false ideas about who I am, what my abilities are, what I like and don't like, what my personality is. I'm going to choose the wrong road too often. So I think we just simply make better life decisions the more accurate we are.
Can you explain the sociometer theory?
Yes. I like to call it sociometer because it sounds cooler than sociometer.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
The sociometer idea came about in my efforts to understand what self-esteem was all about. Psychologists have been talking about self-esteem for 150 years almost, but nobody really could explain what it does. Self-esteem is a positive or negative feeling we have about ourselves, and clearly some people have higher self-esteem. They feel better about themselves than people with lower self-esteem. And at one point, people were suggesting that we have a need for high self-esteem, that we seek high self-esteem because it makes us feel good. That always bothered me a little because just feeling good doesn't serve any real goals. Yeah, we all want to feel good rather than bad about ourselves, but what does it really do for us other than just make us feel good, even if we don't deserve to feel good in some cases because our self-esteem is higher than it should be? Well, as a result of a whole lot of research that we did, it began to look like self-esteem is really part of a gauge, a meter that's built into the brain that really is tied into giving us feedback about how valued and accepted we are by other people. So the sociometer is a gauge, a meter. It's like a gas gauge, like on your car. But instead of telling you how much gas you have in your tank, it's telling you how much social value do you have to other people. And if you think about the things that raise our self-esteem, what do I feel good about? Do I feel good when I'm complimented by other people, when I succeed at things, when I achieve, when I think I'm a nice person, when people want to hang out with me? I feel good. My self-esteem goes up. Well, what's that indicating? It's indicating that I have a certain amount of value to other people. I matter to other people. So we explored this more and more deeply. And the idea of self-esteem being a meter, a gauge that gives us feedback about other people's reactions to us without us even thinking about it much. Because sometimes, somebody just sort of frowns at us and our self-esteem goes down. Well, what's going on? That's saying, hey, pay attention here. There may be something about you that you need to think about to improve your value to other people. And I don't think we have a need for self-esteem. We're not seeking self-esteem for its own sake. Just like when we fill our car up at the gas station, we're not just trying to make the fuel gauge go from empty to full. That's the meter. We're trying to get more gas in the tank. So when we do things that increase our self-esteem, it's not just to make ourselves feel better. It's to increase our social value. But those are sort of the same thing. So as I increase my social value, my self-esteem goes up. But fundamentally, I'm not trying to increase my self-esteem. That's just the indicator that I have more gas in my tank, gas in my social tank now. So it's a different way of looking at what self-esteem is about that sort of brings a lot of pieces of the puzzle together in ways that I don't think had come together before. So sociometer is important in us navigating social life by automatically giving us feedback about how we're doing with other people.
And I feel like a big issue people have is when you get that negative feedback and your meters down here, I feel like in the moment it can feel like it can never go up again.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a good first step to understand if you want higher self-esteem, is understanding that like that meter can go up, like
Yes.
depending on the value you bring to the world.
Yes, and very quickly. I mean, we often talk about people walking around with low versus high self-esteem, which, people do differ in their average level of self-esteem across time. But our self-esteem goes up and down on a momentary basis, and that's actually where its value is. I can feel real good doing something right now, and I feel good, and everybody likes it. And 3 minutes from now, I could make a terrible blunder, and everybody's yelling at me and telling me I'm an idiot. My self-esteem crashes. And a good meter will do that. It's going to keep track of what's going on so that I perk up and say, oh, geez, I need to fix this problem that I created. Now, the meter is not always accurate because our perceptions are not always accurate. To go back to your earlier questions, sometimes I feel more accepted than I should, and sometimes I feel more rejected than I should, which means that my self-esteem can go up and down illegitimately. It's not really tied to social feedback. But it's an alarm that sort of says, hey, pay attention here. Hey, you're doing something good. Let's sort of keep on doing this thing. Or, ooh, take a look at why your self-esteem went down. What happened here? Oh, it was because you offended this other person and they said they didn't want to talk to you anymore and you feel bad about yourself. Well, you probably should feel a little bit bad about yourself. Go and apologize to them, and then your self-esteem goes up again.
Is it also safe to say, I feel like the more evidence you have, more positive evidence you have from the past of like where you match up in the world, because those moments of rejection or like failure are going to happen to everyone throughout your life.
Yep.
So I feel like is having more evidence is being more competent and having more evidence of your ability in the world help in those moments where you have that rejection, not let the meter go down a bunch?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why people with high self-esteem, generally high self-esteem, they weather the ups and downs of good and bad things that happen to them and other people's reactions and successes and failures better than people with lower self-esteem. Because people with lower self-esteem in general often have had a life history of getting a lot of negative feedback. So they don't, when they get negative feedback when they're older, they say, well, yeah, there's more evidence that I'm not a valuable person. Whereas the high self-esteem person says, well, yeah, this person didn't like what I did, but no, boy, a lot of people have in the past. So that's why, childhood is so important. If a person's been grown up in a family that was highly critical and not supportive and not very loving, those people end up with relatively low self-esteem, and their sociometer is going to fire more often when they get negative feedback as an older person, as a teenager, or as an adult. And I think people need to keep that in mind. I mean, people who are really sensitive to rejection need to realize, hey, it's not necessarily my fault. I just got a lot of rejection and devaluation along the way, and so my meter is more sensitive to that than somebody who was loved and adored for their childhood.
Yeah, and the people who have that history of rejection and failure, and they're used to their low self-esteem being here, it makes it that when you get those compliments or you do something good every once in a while, it can almost give you imposter syndrome, and it can almost make you feel like this must not be true because I have so much evidence from the past to support that I'm worthless, right?
That's right. It would be really nice if we could sort of erase our memory of all of that stuff. If you could erase the memory of how your sociometer worked in the past and just judge it on the basis of the feedback at the moment, I think we would all be a little bit better off, because we carry that history with us, and it's going to influence how we react to how people respond to us.
Yeah, they a lot of people have the issue of taking rejection and failure and they turn it into their identity of who they are as a person.
Yes.
When reality tends to be a lot more simpler, you probably just like did the wrong thing. And instead of like young people have this problem a lot is when they have a rejection or failure, they kind of like internalize it and they make it their identity that like this must be a problem with me. But instead, it was probably you probably just were doing the wrong things. And when you're young, like you don't really realize that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because we all do things that distance other people from us our entire lives. None of us are always going to have people liking and adoring and wanting to hang out with us. But if you think that each time somebody is not interested in talking to you or rejects you, it's something deep down about you and your personality, that's probably not right. You're absolutely right. We all just do things as we go along, miscalculations, misperceptions. We're in a bad mood on that particular day, and we just didn't do what we should. And but internalizing and saying, well, yeah, I'm a complete failure, nobody likes me, is almost always wrong. I mean, it is. I mean, it would be better to judge it on the basis of the current evidence, not the history that I've gone through the past 10 or 20 or 30 years.
Now, but with that being said, is there any like genetic or like biology factors that contribute to self-esteem? Or is it all, it's like the nature versus nurture thing, right?
Yes. Certainly, since the brain is inherited in a sense, I mean, it's got genetic, your brain is the result of the genes that you inherited from your parents. Some people's brains are more reactive than others. That's why introverts and extroverts differ to some extent, as extroverts want more stimulation and introverts want less stimulation, and that's sort of built into their brain. So I don't think there's any question that in the case of self-esteem or in the case of reactions to rejection and acceptance, some basic functions of the brain in terms of how quickly it reacts and whether it reacts negatively or positively, some of that's inborn. It's hardwired. It's not that you can't push it around a little bit. But fundamentally, as your self-esteem changes throughout the day, when you get positive versus negative feedback, that's a function of the situations you're in and the feedback you're getting and how you're thinking about the feedback you're getting, or even how you're imagining other people are thinking about you, even if they're not doing anything, can play a role. And I'm not sure that those beliefs have a very strong genetic basis. Those are things you've sort of learned to do to interpret the world and interpret your own behavior and people's reactions to you that you've picked up along the way. And you can change those.
How do we raise self-esteem when we don't get any feedback from the outside world? Because there's times where like you just don't get any feedback at all for stuff that you do. Are there ways to try to increase your self-esteem without getting that feedback?
Well, I think our feedback can go up and down even with no feedback. I mean, I think our self-esteem can go up and down with no feedback. So I can go do a good deed and put some money in a donation box. Nobody sees me. There's no feedback. But I can walk away feeling, hey, yeah, I did something good. I'm a good person in this moment. So we often feel good or bad about ourselves, not because we got feedback, but because we're imagining what value would people place on us if they knew about it. It's our beliefs about the positivity or negativity of what we just did. So what that means is how we think about what we did, irrespective of what other people say, is going to influence our self-esteem. And
yeah,
go ahead.
I also feel like if you go throughout your day and you're doing the right things on a consistent basis, like you know deep down that you're doing the right things. Right. And that I feel like that can help with your with not only with self-esteem but with confidence. Like you have confidence in yourself that I'm doing the correct things. You know deep down in your heart. But everyone can relate to this when you have those off weeks where you're not doing the things you're supposed to do, where you know you're missing the mark. It's almost like an internal feeling like you know that you're missing the mark, you're not doing the right thing.
That's exactly right. And I think the sociometer in sort of affecting how we feel about ourselves as a function of whether we're valuable to other people or not, I think it's designed to give us that feedback when we're by ourselves. Because sometimes we do things when we're by ourselves that if other people found out that I stole this stuff, for example, they're going to reject me. So your sociometer has to warn you when you're doing things in private that if other people found out, it would lower your relationship value to them. And when we do positive things in private, we feel good about ourselves to continue to motivate us to do that. So you don't have to get feedback. It's this talking to yourself in your head, your own self-talk, that plays a big role. And in fact, in everything we've been talking about here, it's not just what's happening in the environment around you, other people's reactions or feedback that you're getting. It's really based on how are you thinking about it. Because that little voice in your head says, man, you screwed up here, even if nobody else said anything. Or, hey, that was a good job. And that little voice almost never goes away for any of us. And that's what it determines, to some extent, our self-esteem and our emotional reactions to life.
Yeah, and like I bet people can relate to this too, is when like someone gives you a compliment for something, or they say something that's admirable about you, but like you know yourself better than that person knows you. So like even if they give you that compliment, you could still be like, yeah, but like I'm not actually doing that. I'm not hitting the mark here. So like everyone can relate to that when you get a compliment from someone about something, but like deep down you know that like that's not true.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Or in the other direction, when people sometimes, when they're critical, no, I wasn't that bad. I didn't do that. You're overreacting to this. And so we do have to think about how do we think about and interpret in our own minds and talk to ourselves about the things that happen to us, about other people's reactions, about our successes and failures. I mean, that's success or failure. I mean, if you think about a student, all right, I got a 40 out of 100 on a test. All right, and oh my God, it's terrible. Well, it's just a number on a piece of paper. Objectively, it's how you talk to yourself. And if it doesn't matter, you can say, well, okay, I didn't like this course anyway. This doesn't hurt my grade. I did well on the other ones. Or I can say, if this is a disaster, my parents are going to kill me. I'm never going to succeed in life because I did badly on this test, and exaggerate it. So we do have to watch our self-talk, because that'll put us in a hole as well.
Yeah, it's self-esteem, not like what other people think about me esteem, right?
Yes, it is self-esteem, although it is based, like I was saying, heavily on what do I think other people think about me, whether their views are correct or not. But yes, it's how do I feel about myself?
And something that you said there that's very important. It's not what other people think of you. It's what you think that other people think of you.
Yes.
Right? It's like a perception of a perception.
Yes, it's a perception of a perception. And on top of that, it's an interpretation of the implications of that perception. So I'm perceiving what you're thinking of me, and I decide whether that's good or bad, and that makes me feel good or bad about myself. But then I also have to, there's another layer. So even if I decide, well, yes, you really don't like me and don't think I'm doing a good job, and I think kind of agree with that, then I can still say, well, does it matter in this case? It doesn't matter in this case whether this particular person likes me. And I was in a grocery store in Switzerland a few years ago, and I tried to crack a joke with the cashier. And I don't know if there was a cultural difference or I came across it. She looked at me just like I was despicable, disgusting. And what I said was just an attempt to be humorous, and it wasn't off color or anything. And I walked out of the store and I thought, oh my God, that woman thinks I'm a disgusting idiot. But then this other little voice came in my mind and says, it doesn't matter. You're in Switzerland. You're never going to see this woman again. So I think a lot of times we react to things, even if they're valid criticisms, when it doesn't matter. And we need to ask ourselves, does it matter in this case? It's not that you don't remember it and say, well, I think I'll be more careful next time when I talk to somebody in Switzerland. But why would I agonize over it if it truly has no implications for the quality of my life?
Yeah, my mom went to Switzerland like last year, and she was telling me that she was they were like having dinner, like they're having wine, they're like laughing, like being loud, like typical loud Americans, and like people around them were looking at them like they were crazy.
Yes,
and like
right.
you could, and so like there's also like there's other factors to it too, like cultural.
Sure.
I'm sure everyone's different too. Like some people are just like not even like within the same culture, like people like perceive like differently as well. So that's something to keep in mind too, right?
Absolutely. We have different preferences than other people. We have different norms about how people should act or not act. Yeah, and so it doesn't mean necessarily that you're a bad person. That person didn't like what you were doing. And maybe that matters and you ought to realize, oh, I should never do that again. That person doesn't like the fact I stole that thing. Well, okay, that's reasonable. Don't do it again. But if it's, you talk too loud, well, whatever.
I also feel like people just need to accept the fact that not everyone's going to like you.
That's right.
And like not necessarily that that's your fault. It's just their preference. I feel like a lot of people, they try so hard to get everyone to like them that they hold themselves back in a way. When the reality is simply like, no matter what you do, like there's just going to be some times where people you annoy someone without like even trying, or like everyone's different in that way, the way they get angry about certain stuff.
That's a very, very, very good point. There's no way everybody's going to like you. And even if they don't dislike you, do you like everybody? Do you want to be everybody's friend? No. We don't have the time or resources to do that. And again, you and I have both mentioned here, sort of thinking about how human beings evolved back in the day. These mechanisms in the brain that monitor what other people think, the sociometer. We were living in little groups of 30 people, and that's all we ever interacted with. And most of them were family members of one kind or another. So we were inherently accepted already, and we didn't have to worry about what everybody thought. Compare that to today, where, for somebody going to a high school with 1,000 people, yeah, those other 999 are not all going to like you, and it doesn't matter. And you get on social media, now I'm sure the rest of the world's not always going to like you. Our brain was designed to deal with social relationships in a very small, tight-knit group where you knew everybody from the time you were born, and they were probably mostly family members. And so it was already supportive. And yes, you were worried about what they thought. You didn't want them to be upset with you and kick you out of the group. But that was much different than in modern life, where there's just dozens, hundreds of thousands of people out there, and you're trying to get them all to like you. No, you don't need all of that. You need a small group of people who are supportive. But yeah, too many of us worry too much about what other people think.
Yeah, how is social media affecting that sociometer? Like I feel like it plays a big factor nowadays, where most people's social interactions are online now, and not only like you said, you don't have that group of 30 anymore. You have that group of 30 that maybe you see like once or twice a week, but then you have like the entire world that you're like see every day. So what effect is social media really having on that sociometer?
I think it keeps the sociometer just flying back and forth all the time. And since there's so much negativity on social media, yeah, people didn't like your post and they criticized you and they made fun of you. Yeah, that's not nice. We don't want to do that to people, but we weren't designed to be able to fend off all of that, either negative feedback or even neutral feedback. I posted something and nobody responded at all. Oh God, that must mean I'm really boring or they don't like me. It's a real problem for self-esteem and the sociometer and a sense of acceptance. Because most people, if you post things on social media, most people are not going to respond positively. Most of it aren't going to respond, period. And you'll get some positives, but you're going to get some negatives too. Yeah, we're not designed to handle that massive amount of feedback about our behavior and ourselves. It's a real problem.
Are you worried then in a way about the mental health of people who are growing up with social media?
There's a lot of research now, I think most people are aware of it, showing that the generation who grew up in social media, who sort of got into their teenage years 10 to 15 years ago, are struggling more with anxiety and depression. And it's not that they're psychologically inferior to previous generations. It's not that they're inherently more anxious and depressed. I think they're dealing with more of the kinds of things you and I have been talking about. All this different kinds of feedback and having to work harder to present an image of themselves other people will value, and worrying about what my pictures and my posts look like. I think that's a direct consequence of being bombarded by too much social feedback that's really kind of irrelevant, but our brain can't separate that. It's not designed to say, well, I can ignore these 10,000 people. It's just not designed that way. So you have to talk yourself out of it. You have to consciously override the natural mechanism to feel badly about yourself and have emotional reactions to all this feedback by saying it doesn't matter. The people close to you, it matters. The people in the groups you're a member of, yeah, sure. Yeah, I want most of them to like having me around, sure. But not the rest of the world. It just doesn't work.
And I feel like you're better able to handle all of those other all like the a lot of people criticizing you if you have a good circle, like in person circle, like you have a good family, you have a good group of friends. I feel like that helps you fend off all those other people online that might be thinking negatively of you, right?
I think that's absolutely true. And I think people should realize it doesn't take very many people. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of young people who think, would agree with what you just said, but they say, but still, I don't have enough friends but research shows that most people don't have that many good friends, and it only takes a couple to give you the kind of support and positive evaluation and validation and connection that you need. You don't need 15 friends. You can get by with just a couple. And so I think our standards for friendship are even higher than they used to be, when schools were smaller and we interacted with fewer people.
Yeah, everyone. This is a problem with younger people is they think it's more about the quantity than the quality, and a perfect way to just get rid of that completely is just to like think of like all the celebrities who have like millions and millions of people who adore them, but yet they do these addictions. They have alcohol addiction. They're depressed. Some even take their own life, unfortunately. Right. So that's the quality. The quality of your relationships isn't about how many. It's about like the quality of those. Like you said, like even like having like 5 people that like it's like a really deep connection. Like that's way more important than having the world like you.
Absolutely. And these can be friends. They can be brothers and sisters. It can be other family members. Can be supportive adults like coaches and teachers. People who enjoy having a connection with you is all you need. And again, think back to cavemen time. There were only a few people in that group, and that was perfectly okay. That's all you really needed. You didn't need 10,000.
How do we best navigate rejection? Like how do we internalize it? How do we move on? How do we navigate when we get rejected in any form, whether it's relationships, school, whether it's getting a bad grade, it's getting fired from a job?
First thing I think is to separate the true negative implications of the rejection from how it makes you feel about yourself. There are some rejections that have really important implications. When long-term romantic relationships break up, yeah, that's changing my life. When I get fired from a job, yeah, I got a problem now. So I've got a real problem to deal with. But on top of that, then I have how do I feel about myself and my future in this domain, and how am I talking to myself about it? And there's a lot of rejections that, they hurt, but they don't have any real implications, like a romantic rejection or getting kicked out of school or fired from a job. So the first thing I do is separate the real implications for the quality of your life from how it makes you feel about yourself, and deal with those separately, because you've got problems to solve, with the real implications of the rejection. And then it takes, to go back to what we were saying earlier, I think just a very objective, reasonable, rational analysis about what happened here. How much of it was my fault? Sometimes it is. I failed the test because I didn't study at all. Okay, well, whose fault is that? I got rejected because they don't want me to be in the team anymore because of what I did one day that was really bad. Okay, well, I just don't do that again. Sometimes it's not about you. It's the other person and the problems they're having and their reactions. Or again, their preferences. It's not that you're a bad person. They just decided, well, no, they'd rather spend time with this person than with you. Yeah, that hurts, no question. But that's different than if you had done something. It's often really hard to tease these apart, but I think taking a very objective and rational and reasonable, analyze it, write it down on pieces of paper. What are the possible causes of this? How much of it's me? How much of it's them? How much of it's just an incompatibility with a friend? Friendships. I've had good friends where they just faded away. And in one sense, it's hurtful. Well, how come they don't want to hang out with me? But if you look at it rationally, you say, well, we kind of grew in different directions. We don't have the same common interests we did when we first became friends. It only makes sense they're not as interested in hanging out with me. So it buffers it a little bit often to be as rational as you can, and realize it's not necessarily about you.
Yeah, it's tough to be rational when you just have no idea. And like
Yes.
a great example of this is like in modern day like dating, like getting ghosted. Like that could mean a million different things. Like you have no idea what the truth is. And so that can make you almost go crazy and like come up with stories about the situation that weren't even true.
Yep.
Just because of silence. And so
Yes.
that silence, right? That not knowing, like, can make people perceive the situation completely wrong.
Absolutely. It makes you perceive it wrong, and it makes you wonder what you don't have any way to improve it in the future. If there was something you could have done differently, you don't know what the heck it was because you don't know what went wrong in this particular situation. So yeah, that's a great example. I mean, that's clearly affecting a lot of people. Yeah, they just don't even contact me anymore. Never hear from them. Don't respond to my texts. What the heck? I think there's some lessons here for the rest of us. You know, we look at it as being the person who is rejected. We've been talking about that, and we don't feel valued. But sometimes we're the person who's not valuing other people, or we're rejecting them, or we're finding that we don't want to hang around with them anymore. I think it also helps for us to think about what is the best way for us to handle those situations where we're the rejecter rather than the rejectee. Because there are better and worse ways to distance yourself from other people that are less damaging to people than just ghosting them or having a big fight with them and never talking to them again. That's hard to do too, when you realize that you're the one that needs to fire somebody or give them a bad grade or break up with them in a romantic relationship or just don't want to be their friend anymore. But, you know, I think there's an element of thinking about how do I do this so it doesn't cause this person a lot of psychological distress.
Yeah, a lot of people they criticize, like, when, let's say, they get ghosted or they get rejected, they're like, why can't this person just be honest with me? Why can't they tell me the truth? And then 3 months later, they're the person that has to reject someone, and then they lie, they come up with excuses, they ghost someone, and so
Yep.
it's important to look at, like, to make sure you're not a hypocrite when you're criticizing other people, and make sure you're not doing the same things.
Yeah, and we've all done it, but it's good to try to keep an eye on that.
What about social anxiety? What do you say to someone who's really struggling with social anxiety? And it can be caused a lot of times by these rejections in the past. It can make you very anxious for other social interactions or other stuff in the future. How do we navigate social anxiety?
Absolutely. Well, social anxiety in a particular situation comes down to I am concerned in this situation with the impressions that I might be making on other people. We're concerned with how we come across, partly because we want to be valued. We want to have connections with other people. But even if that's not the case, it might be I'm trying to get a job, or I'm giving a talk in class and I feel like I'm going to look like an idiot to everybody. So I feel socially anxious. I feel nervous, or I'm meeting somebody for the first time. So it's all about my concern with how other people are perceiving me and the implications of that. So the first thing is, sort of tied into other things we've talked about, is again to do a rational analysis of, is this reasonable? Do I need to be concerned? Does it matter what these people think? First of all, sometimes it does. Why am I worried about it? Am I really going to come across badly, or am I just afraid that I might? And there's a difference there. I've walked into situations where I knew I was unprepared and I was going to come across badly, and I was socially anxious. There's other cases where I was prepared, but I was still socially anxious because I knew something might go wrong. Well, that's different. I mean, things might go wrong all the time. Walking out of your house, you might get hit by a meteorite. I mean, things may go wrong. To the extent that you can postpone your anxiety until there's some evidence that they're going wrong, I think you can lower your social anxiety to some extent. So ask whether this matters. How likely is it that I'm going to make a bad impression that has implications on people's connections with me? And I think when you do that, again, a certain percentage of these cases just fall away, and you go, well, no, it doesn't really matter that much. Of course, we all want to come across well. Do we all come across well all the time? No, we don't do that. And to sort of live with the fact that even if we don't make a great impression, as long as we're not completely humiliating and embarrassing ourselves, it's probably going to turn out all right. Social anxiety is fascinating because virtually everybody experiences it, some people more than others. And if we can get it turned down a little bit, it gives you the confidence you need to walk into different social situations without being terrified of what the implications may be.
How do we treat ourselves better? Like, how do we get better at self-compassion? Because I feel like a lot of people out there, they beat themselves up unnecessarily, and it's kind of sabotaging themselves.
Absolutely. It's interesting, you know, we often treat other people far better than we treat ourselves, even though we're selfish and we look out for ourselves first. So There's a lot of times if a friend of yours does something bad or something bad happens to them. Let's think about we're talking to students here maybe, and yeah, a friend of yours gets a 60 on a test. You don't go, "You idiot! Why didn't you study harder? What the heck is wrong with you?" But if you got a 60 on the test, you tell yourself, "You idiot! Why didn't you study harder?" So we show more compassion to other people sometimes than we do to ourselves. A lot of times that's because we feel like we need to do that to keep ourselves in line. And before I learned about self-compassion, I was a lot harder on myself than I really needed to be. Do you need to feel a little badly when you screw up and fail at something because you didn't do a good job? Yeah, it's okay to say, I should have done better at that. Do I need to beat myself up and lose sleep over it and have my self-esteem affected? And the answer is usually not. So the first question is to say, yes, it's okay to feel badly when you do something bad. But how bad do I need to feel just to tell myself, hey, you need to do better next time? And a lot of times you're just being meaner than you should. So that's the first thing, is just ask yourself, okay, how hard do I need to be on myself? The second part of it is, are there benefits to be gained by being more kind and compassionate when things go wrong? Because there are. I mean, it's more motivating when I've done something bad or something bad's happened to me to be kind to myself, to give myself a break, let myself back off a little bit and feel a little bit better and remind me of things that are going well in my life at that moment. That's more energizing. It makes you more relaxed. It makes you want to get out of bed in the morning as opposed to just lying there and thinking about the stuff that you screwed up. So there are benefits. And I think in our culture, I think we're sometimes trained to be harder on ourselves than we need to be, and it's a sign of weakness to be nice to yourself. But it's not. It's mentally healthy, and you don't want to go too far. You don't want to say, well, whatever I do and whoever I am, it's perfectly okay. Well, no, because that means if you run over people with your car or rob things from the bank, well, that's all right. No, it's not. But to be realistic about what's okay and how bad is this thing that happened anyway, how bad should I feel, how much should I beat myself up, and to look at the positive sides of being kind toward yourself when you need it.
Yeah, I feel like being nice to yourself doesn't mean you can't criticize yourself too.
That's right. That's exactly
Because like someone you really love about and care about, I'm sure there's people in your life where that you really care about, and but you still give them criticism or constructive criticism so they can get better.
Yes.
Instead of just like you said before, it's not about just being oh, everything's fine, you're fine, it was everyone else's problem. It was never your issue.
Right.
It's that's self-compassion too, is being honest with yourself when you do fall short.
Yes. Yes. And again, it comes back to looking at this as reasonably and rationally as possible and trying to get the emotion out of it. I mean, you're going to have the emotional reactions. There's nothing wrong with the emotional reactions. They're perfectly normal. But they can cloud your thinking and your motives in trying to make things better for yourself. So really look at it deeply. How big of a deal was this? What needs to be done? But you don't have to beat yourself with a stick. And I used to think I did. I really thought that the harder I was on myself, the better person I would be. And nah, that didn't work.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that younger people have about growing up and becoming an adult?
I don't know. I don't know for sure. One of mine was that everything was going to be okay once I was an adult. That all of these insecurities and uncertainties and troubled relationships and problem friendships and failures along the way, if I can just get out and get my own life and move ahead in my own job and take my own path, then everything's going to be all right. It's part of being human, and it doesn't go away. And if we were talking on a podcast to adults, we could be talking about these exactly same things. My age, we could be talking to people who are retired, and we're going to talk about this same set of issues. These are human issues. Every person on the face of the earth experiences them, every typical person. So I think one thing to know is that the things that you're going through as a young person is training for being able to handle them better as an adult, although they're never going to go away. Now, that might sound pessimistic to say, well, no, you're still going to have these things. Of course you are. You're going to have failures and rejections and miscalculations along the way. But it's also somewhat relieving to say it's not because I'm just a teenager who doesn't know what he or she is doing. Yeah, no, I'm doing fine, but this is life. Life is not always going to be smooth. The question is, how do we deal with it most effectively, and how do we cope with it within ourselves?
So my last question is, if you had the ability to have a 1 minute conversation with your younger self, what would you tell him?
Not to take my life as seriously as I did. I mean, there are things that we have to take seriously. And I never want to sound like I'm saying, well, don't worry about anything. Everything's going to be fine, or don't worry about anything. But there were things I fretted over that in retrospect were just part of living. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my friends or my dating relationships or my school experience. Yeah, it's just everybody experiences it. It's human life. And I didn't quite understand how to separate the things that were about me in particular from the things that are just universal human experiences. And had I known that, I think I could have rolled with the punches a little bit better. I could have dealt with the ups and downs a little more to just realize, no, this is perfectly normal. Yeah, you're heartbroken right now and you feel awful and don't want to get out of bed. Okay, that's going to happen a few times in life. That's normal. Everybody has that. Oh, you feel like you failed. You let people down. You feel rejected. Okay. Yeah, it's just you navigate the best you can. You try to figure out how to behave and how to be the right kind of person. And then you learn how to cope as best you can. And again, part of that's just realizing it's not all about you. These are universal human experiences. Everything you and I have talked about in the last hour have involved human experiences.